and Temple accepted me, but actually the art school denied me at first. And I bawled my eyes out. I'm like, my life's over. This is the best, one of the best art schools on the East Coast to go to. I have to do this. And so instead of honestly just accepting that as my fate, I had wrote a letter to the art school and said, I'm curious why my application wasn't accepted. Like, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I had no doubt in my, bone in my body that I was good at, design and artistry, whatever, the whole nine. They had told me that I wasn't a good enough drawer, that the drawings that I submitted were not good. And I was like, okay, well, I'm applying to the graphic design program. Like, does that really matter? And so, I was like, okay, give me 1 week. I will resubmit drawings. And I remember I locked myself in my room for a week. I turned off my phone. I didn't talk to anyone. And I just sat and drew. I had to draw a self-portrait and one other still life. And it was like, I don't even know how many times I redrew it. I think like 7 or 8. And I took the best ones, resubmitted it. And they were like, okay, yeah, you can draw. We'll accept you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there we go. So I would say that's one of the biggest, because I do remember, at that moment in time, it feels like your life's over, it's shattered, you won't go on. But just, not that you should ever not accept no for an answer, but just knowing, if something feels and having that intuition that this is what you're meant to do, then stand by that and don't just, sometimes say no, be like, what can I do, or how can I improve this?
Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
Sarah, where are you and what do you do?
Currently, I am a senior designer at Under Armour, so based out of Baltimore at their global headquarters.
And you're graphic design at Under Armour, not product design, right?
Yes, correct. I get that question a lot. I feel like when I say senior designer, that's the first thing that jumps to people's heads is like, oh, what do you design? Footwear, t-shirts. And I'm like, actually, I get the products and do, mainly the product marketing of it and things of that nature. So yeah, it's definitely something to explain.
So as we were talking about before the call, and as some people in the audience may be aware, the GFDA background is in graphic design, and we have our own in-house studio. We do branding and marketing and that sort of thing, like, workaday graphic designers. But it's we're a little bit of a underappreciated group of people sometimes. It's a little bit of a common like conversation to commiserate with other people in design and marketing that everybody when you work in design, everybody, and especially for a corporation or a bigger organization, everybody wants to come around, tell you you're a genius because you make everything look good and everything. But you're you kind of gotta fight for your place at the table sometimes. So
For
t-
sure. For sure.
totally.
I know
But
that sentiment.
so how long you been in the graphic design game?
I graduated in 2017, so I guess coming up on about seven years now. And actually this month will be 2 years at Under Armour. So it's been a journey for sure. But previously, as you mentioned, I actually came from agency world. And that's where, prior to Under Armour, I was on the agency side for about 5, 6 years. So it was kind of nice to have that experience before kind of ending up in this position.
So you went to college for graphic design, and then you actually became a graphic designer.
Yep. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
doesn't always work out that way sometimes.
No, it doesn't. That's for sure. And I think now just seeing, with certain tools pop up like Canva and other things that really make anyone kind of have that access at their fingertips without, going to college or get a degree, it's definitely interesting to see some of the, self-starters or self-proclaimed kind of graphic designers emerge as well, kind of just out of a different realm of the industry.
Yeah, well, I suppose that in your role, you're every year there's like a new sort of generation of people that you're looking at and considering for positions, and you're assessing skills, and those skills change really fast in
Oh,
today's
they do.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, it
So
can be intimidating. I feel like, I still sit on a panel for my alma mater. I went to Temple University, but when the students kind of graduate and helping with portfolio reviews, So seeing the work that comes out of there, it kind of is like, oh my gosh, next level, or, the animation and the steps that they're taking in interactive design. And now, AI technology is just, it's mind blowing, and it just constantly makes you feel like there's something new to learn, or there's always something new to learn. In addition to Adobe always constantly updating their programs for us. So I feel like, yeah, just constantly learning new things and wanting to push yourself to kind of keep up with everything that is going on. It can be overwhelming at times, for sure.
Yeah, well, I remember even I did my education like 50 billion years ago in the early 2000 teens. And I remember even then, and of course, I taught design for a number of years, and it always seemed like no matter what, there was that sort of next generation. The outlook, their exposure to media is different, and their every sort of group of younger people that come up, their acclimation to new technology, their willingness to try new stuff, it seems like it really accelerates. That's one of the big differences I've seen. Is I remember being younger and getting, starting in design and just always being um very resistant to whatever the new app was. And it's like you'd see other people trying new stuff and it's like, oh, well, I've already learned how to do this. And that game does not work like that anymore.
It does not work like that. Yeah, I felt that way, truthfully, about TikTok when it came out. I downloaded it. What's this new thing? You got to see what it is, like the shiny new toy. And I would find myself scrolling hours. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been on my phone for 3 hours. So I'm like, I can't do this. Instagram, Facebook, it's already enough. I'm not adding this in. But being a designer and then having to design for these platforms, then you feel the need to master them. You feel the need to be in the know and know the trends and the songs and the hashtags. So then, I challenged myself this year is like, I'm gonna, learn TikTok. I'm gonna be on TikTok, maybe even post some things, but I'm gonna control, the time that I do spend on it and be intentional about learning it, just for the business side. But it's really tricky. I agree with that, to have that resistance of like, that's such a Gen Z thing. I'll never need that. Well, I need to know, obviously, especially having them as part of our target audience, in most cases. So it's interesting.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other aspect to it. Isn't it's not just the team that you have to be able to connect with and stay relevant to, but that you've got Under Armour's a really big brand. How many countries are you guys in?
Well, that's a good question. It's always growing. I want to say, I think it's 23. I have
23.
to double check on that. Yeah, the watch, they're going to quote me on this. They're like, Sarah's out here telling everything. We have a lot of regions, for sure. I think we're in like at least 6 main regions, that being North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia. So there is definitely a lot of regions. I think it's different for us because we sit at a global level. So we kind of control the creative from a global standpoint, and then it kind of gets taken down by each region and adapted if necessary, whether that's swapping out a different athlete for it to be more relevant, or kind of just slightly changing the design again so that it feels aesthetically in line with that region, as well. That's kind of how we differ in those.
Yeah, so you're really sort of establishing a visual language for the brand, and probably also like an interactive language for the brand. And
Mhm.
then as the marketing and branding gets disseminated through different regions, they're adapting the dialect so that it's going to meet their audiences. And
Yeah.
your team is you're at the corporate headquarters, so you're touching all of it, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big, massive in-house creative team. There's been definitely a lot of shift and changes. I'm sure people have maybe seen in the news we got a new CEO last year, Stephanie Lenartz, who was the former VP of Marriott. So she was kind of running Under Armour for the past year, and just actually 4 days ago, Kevin Plank, the founder and owner, just recently stepped back in as CEO. So kind of taking the reins and leading again. But with that, there's been a lot of shift in organization, and just how we're structured, and trying to be more efficient and break down those silos that I think at every corporate job you have, and trying to really make things, more efficient and seamless. So we work on a larger team that's kind of divided in two. One oversees men's training and all of kind of sports categories in that respect. And then the other one is all of women's category. And now what we're introducing at Under Armour, the sportswear or sports style, and really leaning into the stylish components of the technology that we have created. So I sit on the arm now under the women's creative and the sports style. Still kind of, we're all interchanging. So a lot of it can be co-gender at times, or, there's different products that, are made for both men and women. So we cross over all the time. But that's how they kind of been divvying it up lately.
Yeah, is there with such a large organization, are there challenges with like interdepartmental communication and expectations and needs and the clarity of those things?
Definitely. I think that that's probably the biggest challenge, and trying to also just, stay positive through it all. I think, you try to assume everyone has good intent. We're all, working for the same goal, and stay on that positivity. But yeah, this season especially has been a little tricky. What we used to do was kind of, you got briefed on a product, whether that was a sports bra or a new short or a sneaker. And you would go and kind of create that creative idea. You would be the art director on set, see it through everything. And there would be a photo shoot designated for that specific product. But this year and this season coming up, we actually approached it as an entire super shoot, so that everything kind of had a similar look and feel and aesthetic. Which I think is going to put us in a really successful position coming up this season, and kind of cut out a lot of that, siloed communication and working independently on your projects, and really seeing the work this season as, one entire kind of creative approach, and showing up as one brand, consistently across different products and stories. So I'm excited for that to actually come to fruition. But the communication on that end has been challenging, for sure. We all have creative directors who then report to our VP of creative, who then sits on an executive team and reports into marketing, and that marketing director then reports into Kevin Plank now at this point. So it definitely is large, and to make some changes, it can be tough. But I think everyone has a vision here, and we're working towards it.
Yeah, well, so as we were talking about before, GFDA has worked with a lot of fairly large corporations, Fortune 500s and Fortune 100s,
Mhm.
and we run a workshop that essentially breaks down barriers between people, and one of the major issues that our clients will reveal in our discovery phase is that they you'll have a team who's responsible for selling things out in the wild, and then you'll have or a department, a division, and then you'll have another division that's responsible for coming up with new stuff, basically, whether that's art or whether it's actually product development or whatever.
Mhm.
And there's push and pull between these two people, because a lot of people on the sales side, they say, hey, we want something new. Come up with something new. We need to shake up the market, come up with something new. And then that creative side, the development side, they come up with something new, and the marketing side says, well, no, but we can't sell that. We want something like the other thing we did. We want something new like the other thing we did. And that's what that boils down to is in a lot of times, not exclusively, but a lot of times that boils down to the acceptance of creative risks, right? And people who are creatives and who are trained as creatives and who have years of experience working in a creative field and making stuff, they're really comfortable with taking creative risks, because they have a lot of different ideas, and they'll put that idea, they'll create it, and if it doesn't work, they ball it up, throw it in the trash can, try the next thing. And so they don't have an internal resistance to that. But people whose mode of success doesn't necessarily come from that internal creativity, it comes from external feedback. They're more risk adverse and risk averse, and they they have a really hard time accepting the creative risk from creative people. And trust issues erupt. And as you said, everybody's on the same team. Everybody wants to be successful. And particularly some of these people are super high performing people. I mean, like ultra super high performing type A people, but it's really, really hard. And so what we do is we go in and like mix all these departments up together and make them do a bunch of things that seem really silly to them. And then at the end of the experience, um, they've gone out on a limb together and they've failed and succeeded together. And then they see, that the world's still spinning if it didn't work out. So I don't know, is that idea of creative risk, does that sound like something familiar to you?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I am by nature, I think just a risk taker in general. So coming into Under Armour too, where I think, where they were positioned in relative to 5, 6 years ago and after COVID, everyone's struggling right now. So to kind of get back up on their feet. But it's been hard because, you do want to push outside the box, and we're constantly hearing like, we need something new, you need that next big idea, or something, always being push, push, push. But then I feel like the moment that you do push and you make someone uncomfortable, then it's like, whoa, 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 we got to pull this back. Whoa, 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 we're still Under Armour or whatever that may be. It does kind of make people feel uncomfortable. But I feel like when they do get to that situation, that's a good place to be in, because now it's not something that is the same, that is familiar to them. I always reference, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you're not willing to, try something different or push the needle on creative, it's really hard to kind of see that growth or that change without taking those risks. So it's definitely tricky. And I think trust plays a lot in that. We even saw that kind of with approaching this super shoot, and, each marketer and kind of people from other teams have their own list of like, I need this and I want this and I want to see this. And everyone has a vision in their head of what they think it should look like. So then to kind of see the output of, everything holistically as a brand this season, I think it definitely made some people feel uncomfortable. We're definitely a performance brand as well. So we're always trying to stay grounded in sport. So pushing the needle into style this past year and trying to be more relevant in that sense has definitely, give some people a little bit of a niche. But I think it's all good. And that's where you start to see some changes being made and some differences kind of actually happening in the output or the growth or the KPIs or metrics or whatever people are looking at. So.
Yeah, well, it's what it comes down to is perspective, because at the end of the day, both of those groups of professionals are right. They both have their area of expertise. They're both looking at their input, their jobs, and they're assessing them to the best of their ability. And the finding that place where you can sort of mix those two together, that's the real challenge. And of course, a lot of times other complicated things like internal politics and people climbing the ladder, that's always going to be part of the corporate
Always.
struggle. But in on the broader scale, when you can sit down with people and really respect each other's professionalism and respect each other's skill and hard work and dedication to success, um, that's almost got to kind of happen in its own realm,
Mhm.
outside of that individual project, outside of the numbers, outside of all the pressurized things that are happening. And when you get to that place though, when people can sit down and like really express their perspectives to each other, they can almost start processing the other person's challenges and start like thinking about it. Like I tend to be a little bit more disparaging of the people who are risk averse in these scenarios. But the reality is that, creatives a lot of the time have to be respectful of that. They have to be respectful of the fact that their comfort with trying a million different things is something that everybody else doesn't feel. And they
Mhm.
have to be able to sort of ground themselves a little bit in those numbers that, we all hate, and none of us, no graphic designers can do math and that sort of thing. But, yeah. So when you talk about those different perspectives, and also from the corporate level too. They've got their own set of challenges and responsibilities and pressures. I mean, sometimes it's surprising that anything gets done, I think.
It is, yeah, it can be. Sometimes I look at my meetings and I'm like, we're talking about this again. When are we supposed to actually do the work to get it done? Yeah, it's tricky for sure, but I hear you on that. I kind of look at it now, being on this creative team and on this kind of in-house creative, these marketing partners and other people, they are, looking at it a little bit as, we're the agency and they're the client, and making them feel comfortable along the way as we're moving them through this process and facilitating that, because I think it is hard too for other people to see your vision. Like I said, they have something in their head of what they think it should be, and maybe that's right or wrong, not to say that it is, but it's really different and difficult sometimes, to get people to kind of rally around and see, okay, this is what we could be doing, or let's explore this. But what I did learn on being the agency side is, there was always the three concepts. You always presented three concepts. And the way that we looked at it was like, the first one was always the safe bet. Like, hey, this is what we can do. It looks in line with what we've been doing. This is consistent. Maybe it's been working. Maybe it hasn't. Some changes. The middle one kind of pushes that needle a little bit as a happy median. And then the third one's kind of like, we want to make you uncomfortable. We want to push the boundaries. And if it's kind of like, if we had the creative freedom to do what we wanted, this is how we would approach this problem. So I think it's interesting kind of looking at that and showing the range to a client or a partner or something like that in that aspect, to say like, hey, this is where you might be comfortable, and you can visualize that very easily. But imagine what this could look like if we did it this way, or stepped it up this way, or tried this, which I think is helpful for them to kind of see, again, the safe space to maybe jumping off the deep end and then finding that compromise in between. So I feel like that approach has kind of helped me through the years, and I wouldn't have learned that unless I, cut my teeth in the agency side before jumping over here.
Yeah, well, the agency work it can be pretty brutal with that client relationship a lot of times, because a lot of times you show up with the clients, and all clients are not equal, and some are great clients and some are not so great clients. And a not so great client is going to look at it and say, well, my nephew said it should be purple in circles, and sometimes you just got to say, all right, purple in circles, we got to get the paycheck and move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But it's when you've got a high performing creative team, I think that a lot of times what they're going to do is they're going to look to the future of the way the brand feels and matures. And they're going to look at a lot of possibilities, and they're going to say, this is what the brand could move towards. This is why it feels a certain way. And you really have to be able to carry other people along who aren't looking from that same perspective, who are looking more along the lines of like, logistics and inventory, and their outlook on the future is much more linear, where creative's outlook on the future is a lot more organic and undetermined. And that's where the fear comes from, because in the things that we fear the unknown, and
Mm-hmm.
people who can't apply math to it, there's a lot of unknowns that come with that. But I think the idea of an agency approach in house is it can be very useful, and it gives you a lot of empathy for your teammates in other departments.
Yes, that's for sure. And I mean, we still work with agencies at Under Armour too, as well. So it's interesting then to kind of be on the flip side, but again, still feel like you're in that world and space, which is nice, because I love the fast-paced environment. I felt like that was where I thrived in agency under pressure and stress, just like in art school at college. So that's nice that it still carries through and keeps you on your toes for sure.
So do you feel do you think about like the brand is like this almost a living entity? I mean, it's so your Under Armour is so big that your decisions you make for the brand, there's going to be a lot of like cascading effects that
Mm-hmm.
are measurable in a way that just don't happen with a smaller company with smaller reach, right? So does that responsibility weigh on you? Does it make you second guess a lot?
It does. I have. And I used to, well, not used to, I still am. I kind of was an indecisive person of just, people ask you where you go to lunch. I'm like, I don't know, this place or this place, I don't know. And I'm like, you got to start making some decisions here. But I think what has helped is like I've been thrown in the deep end. And instead of being like, what am I going to do? Panic, panic, panic. It's like, you just got to roll with it, honestly, sometimes. When I first came to Under Armour, there was a lot of transition. And after about a year, I lost my creative director. She was let go, unfortunately. And so I got a new creative director who is based out of Los Angeles. So tricky because we had never met in person, only over, video chat, and kind of adapting to, how are we going to get this work, keep it moving. And so after my creative director had left, I had to fly to LA for this photo shoot for this project I was working on. I had never been on set alone as the creative director, creative lead. And I had to direct this photo shoot to make it happen. And I was flying across and I'm on the plane, like, how am I going to do this? What if it sucks? What if I come back and the images suck? Like, they'll tell me it sucks. Like, our VP of creative, he can be tough, but I appreciate his honesty, because you'll get nowhere with beating around the bush, that in creativity. So yeah, it's helped to kind of just throw yourself in. And even when there's times that I've been like, can I do this? Can I not? Just kind of believe that you can, and know that, hey, I have this experience. I've been doing this for 5 years. Here's my moment to shine, and kind of look at it as that opportunity to prove yourself. It did work out successfully, which was good for me. And then to send those images to the VP of creative at Under Armour. He wrote back something like, so stunning, or absolutely stunning. It was that reassurance of like, okay, I'm here, I'm in the right place, I'm supposed to be where I am, and I can do this. So yeah, I think just kind of jumping in and kind of being in this position, and a little bit of this change. And there's been so much change. And, your post today was actually fitting. Change is fucking inevitable. Like, you just kind of got to roll with it sometimes, roll with the punches. And so that's what I've been doing here. Not that they've been beating me up, but it's been a pleasure experience for the past 2 years.
Well, congratulations that your photo shoot didn't bomb.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's that we talked about kind of a lateral relationship in a corporation between departments that are at the end of the day more or less equal in terms of what their job is to make the organization function. But there's also the vertical relationship as well, with groups of people who have to make difficult decisions, and other groups of people who have to make the difficult decisions work.
Mhm.
And that's another thing that a lot of creatives find challenging, because everybody, so when I was a design teacher, I was like the hardest design teacher in school. I taught at a few different universities, and everywhere I went, I was the mean, scary design professor that,
I'm
you
telling
know,
you, a lot of kids are thanking you now, though, because I have to say that it makes you tough. It does. I mean, you walk in, and I remember this one teacher I had, and I'd be scared going in. She'd be like, this sucks. You think this is design? Like, this sucks. And I remember just being so beaten down some days. But now I'm like, I can handle anything you want to tell me about my work. You want to say this sucks? Great. I'll start over again. It builds that resilience. So I hope that you'll get a couple thank yous in the future from your students, because I definitely owe some of my professors some thank yous, reflecting back on what that did for them.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I taught foundations, and so I was the worst of the worst. I was like that freshman, like first
You made
experience
that
they
freshman
got.
cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. I had two people in my office crying a week on average, like no exaggeration. But I did, as they got farther in the program, they would reach back out to me and say, wow, I see a difference between my work and my, how it is in design school, you make little clicks with people. And they're like, my work and Sarah's work, like we're way better than some of the students that had other freshman teachers. And so, yeah, it does pay off. But at the end of the day, I always thought my responsibility was to help people get strong. And, whether it's, whether they go on to be a designer or an accountant, it doesn't matter, because in that one moment they got a little bit stronger and sort of woke up to some harsh realities of life. But in design and in creative fields in particular, there's this balance between this feeling we get from making something nice that we like, we express ourselves, you know, and then the other side of it is what the market demands that's going to make money.
Mhm.
And then there's like a third side of like whoever's in charge and the decisions they make, which could go one way or the other, you know. And one of the harsh realities for a lot of the freshmen was that they were in design school not to express themselves and not to express their feelings. They were in design school to express whatever makes money. And that's the reality. You don't have a job if that's not the case. And if your precious sweet little baby idea that you love so much and you stayed up 3 days to make it and it's the best thing in the world, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You got to throw it in the trash can. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're just starting out and you don't have the weight of the world on every single thing that you do. Because if you're still getting that far invested in stuff and having to throw it away at the last minute when you're at higher levels of responsibility, then tens of thousands of dollars get involved and people will lose their jobs and that sort of thing. And so I always felt an obligation to sort of protect those people from being in that position whenever they got more advanced. But
Mhm.
well, straight off on a tangent there. I don't exactly remember where I was originally going when I started talking, but anyway, here we are. So
Yeah.
you mentioned TikTok earlier,
Mhm.
and I'm really curious to know like there must be there must be a certain pace of change in branding these days and marketing that hasn't been present in the past because that's TikTok, things like that change so much so
Mhm.
quickly. So do you guys talk about that a lot? Like, are you bringing that up a lot?
We do. And, last year it was really nice. Our content partner kind of spearheaded this training around performance marketing and just kind of getting in even to meta and just this whole universe of other things to consider that honestly I'd never even really thought about. But I think it's really interesting. Like you design one day for something or a trend, and that can absolutely change the next day. So what makes it hard is we work a season ahead, so right now we're working on or we just finished fall winter 24, so what's coming out next season, and we'll start SS 25 shortly here once the fall approaches. And so when you're developing for a season ahead and then you put out like, okay, here's all your performance marketing assets, or here's all these assets, run with them, so much can change in 4 to 6 months that might not even be relevant. So it does make it tricky, and makes it kind of hard with sitting at the global level to deliver something that is relevant, to specific regions, and feels like they will leverage this work. Oh, I want to take this design because yes, this is a great idea. It's really kind of tricky to set that at a global standard because I think it is so regionalized and very specific to what's on trend. What kind of, is it more of the youthful teen, or is it kind of that really super hyperactive elite athlete that we have? So there's a tricky range to really be able to manage and kind of finesse to really design for what makes the most sense, and be really articulate on how to use that. A lot of the times I find that we create, these digital style guides that incorporate, okay, this is what you should post for paid performance media, running ads on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And then you actually go to see it down the line and you're like, this isn't what I designed, or this isn't it exactly. And so like they shifted it or they changed it, and probably for good reason too, or other reasons that they see fit based on regional asks or needs. So it's kind of tricky to manage, and really get control of. And I think it's something we're just constantly learning and playing with. We do also have a social media department, so working with that partner to make sure we're facilitating things, or any posts that go, to the main global Under Armour page, making sure that those are really kind of succinct. That will be partnered with a designer and work very closely to make sure it's something that feels premium and elevated, and not just taken down kind of out of a style guide. But yeah, I think TikTok is it's a monster in itself, to be honest, and learning all the different trends. It's like one day I feel like I know something, and then the next day I learn something new, and then the next day I see a trend and I'm like, how is this even a trend? But I mean, I guess if this is what people think is funny nowadays, it's interesting learning too about what Gen Z finds relevant, versus like what millennials are still finding relevant, and where to find that balance in appealing to both of them, as well.
Yeah, I'm super lazy and I'm not ashamed of it. I should be. I used to be, but I'm too lazy to be ashamed of being lazy at this point. And so um for me, one of the and I am the social media manager for GFDA, for better or worse. I shouldn't be, but I am. And for me, it's like it's such a struggle with how much things change because I'm like, God, why should I put my effort into learning this? Because tomorrow it's not going to matter anymore, you know? And so we've been kind of lucky because our content's very regimented and it's very simple. And so we kind of like dodge the bullet a little bit with trends, but obviously with um promoting this podcast soon, I will be using TikTok for the first time and
There we go.
have to do all that stuff too. And I'm dreading it and I'm going to wait until the absolute last minute before I have to do it, even though I sell coffee cups that say don't fucking procrastinate on them. But what's interesting to me though, from your perspective, is that like you talk about that Zoomer versus that high performance athlete. And at this point, GFDA's audience is really far out into fitness professionals and athletes. And I've been really lucky here to have conversations with like Olympic gold medalists and world champions and like really high performing athletes here. And the the idea of marketing, it must be a little bit daunting because that high performing athlete's got needs and they're breaking things down into the minutia. A lot of those people know what they're doing every minute of the day. They're really, really analyzing every single thing about their lives because half a second matters to them in their life. Half a second is the difference between their career going forward. And they the needs of their tools, their equipment, apparel being a tool whenever you're a professional athlete, like that's something that's very specific that you have to cater to in a really delicate way. And you've really got to understand a lot of technical aspects of it. But at the same time, you've got to sell it. You've got to sell it to the Zoomer. There's got to be like a lot of internal dialogue and dancing that goes along with that.
There is for sure. And that's something like we have shifted our focus a little bit over the years where I think we were, elite athletes, the Lindsey Vonns, the Jordan Spieths, the Joel Embiids, Bryce Harper. We have all these big names, Steph Curry, and using them as like, hey, they wear this gear all the time. And having that, you look up to these people, you idolize them and you want to be like them, you want to look like them, these younger kids. And that was a lot of the mentality. And kind of neglecting a lot what we're calling now the varsity athlete. So this high school athlete that grinds all day, every day, that might, be a huge kind of athlete in college, but maybe will never make it to that professional level. Like that is still our audience. That is still our athlete. I mean, they want this gear to perform at their best. But yeah, that is something that we struggled with is Under Armour, and I don't even think I recognized this until I started working there. It is so technical. There is so much technology that is infused in these garments, so much thought, so much testing on pooling and wear and sweat and how can we wick sweat sooner and just returning energy even in t-shirts and products, which is just mind-boggling to me that that's even possible. I don't think the varsity athlete cares about that, but our elite athlete does. We're on the flip side. The varsity athlete wants to be stylish, and the elite athlete, sure, they want to look good, feel good, but that's not their main goal when they're training, to go whatever. Maybe it's Lindsey Vonn or whoever, at this Olympic level, or NBA level, whatever that may be. So it's a tricky dance and balance. I think we lead with like, how can we make this look and feel different for Under Armour at the moment, and really pushing again more into that style and coming up with a unique vision. And then once we hook kind of that person and they're like, oh, I love the way this looks, I love this shirt, or I love this jacket, and they kind of dive a level deeper, then it's like, oh my goodness, look at this technology that's infused in there. I would have never known that. So it's a tricky dance of kind of like attracting the consumer, but then also explaining to the consumer, like, this is why you need this, because not many companies, out there like that and competing, we always say it's performance apparel. This is not just sportswear or whatever, it's performance, and really it's highly technical performance wear. And even when we talk about, moving into this more sports style or street style kind of aspect, it's still highly technical streetwear. I mean, it's still material made from the same material that we're using on, the energy return, or this plush material that won't pull, when you're lifting weights or get caught on anything. So definitely a delicate balance between, again, appealing to that varsity athlete and in comparison to the elite, and being able to attract something for both of them.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of complexity there. It's like between your product development, which is critical to your success, and your brand perception, which is critical to your success. And if those two things, like there's no option for them not to be in alignment with one another, but you've got to create a message, and you've got to create a message that's very simple, especially for social media, where it's like instantaneous, get the right thing across, and there's no second chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like a lot of thought has to go into that for a brand. Because I mean, there's another aspect to it too. That's like, I'm from the southeast where it's really hot, and so a lot of people wear Under Armour shirts, just day to day life. Or a lot of people who are professionals and have to be outside are going to wear them to get that constant flow of sweat off of their body. And it's like, those are like middle-aged dads. And what attracts them to that brand? How did they, and it's probably because word of mouth, or just associating it with a group of people that they identify with, and that's like, stuff like that is almost alchemy in marketing. You can't necessarily do it on purpose, and you just got to ride the wave when it does happen.
Yeah, definitely. And even, I mean, I've only been here 2 years, and there's still so much to learn, but I had never been privy prior to working here too to like the hunt and tactical side of Under Armour, or the fish side, or any of that gear. And I mean, even just seeing that is just, it's a whole nother demographic. It's a whole nother audience, but still someone that could be multifaceted as an athlete, as a dad. You could be all these things and still be, in that kind of circle. But I think it's also interesting, one or the other fitting in these different pockets, and how are we ensuring that everything still feels consistent, when it's hunt and tactical and guns and people kind of running through the woods, versus again these elite athletes who are, kind of training at the same level as these people. Definitely a different take. And it's interesting to work on different projects and be moved around and have to be like, whoa, now I gotta market from 17 to 45 instead of 17 to 21, or whatever that looks like. It definitely opens the aperture to some interesting ideas.
Well, it's funny. So I have like a gym membership for like a local, like 24-hour gym. Well, it's probably national. I don't know. But anyway, um, and so I'm very careful about, like, I've sampled all the different times of day to go to the gym to see who I'm going to be working out with. And when your job is writing motivational swear words on the internet, you have this sort of luxury. You can go to the gym whenever you want. But I've picked evenings just because it's like, honestly, because the evenings are when a lot of the really young people are there, and they don't have the TV on as much. And so that's what that was like how I picked the people that I could get along with. And so there are a lot of, I guess at my gym, the guy who owns it, it's a franchise, but I guess he owns this one. And you can tell he's got to have a kid in high school, or he's got a relationship with the high school somehow, because they've got like the high school athletic posters up, and a lot of the kids that come in there, I can just hear them talking. They're playing sports together, and of course, I'm in this unique position as the social media manager, and I think a lot about different demographics of people, and why a GFDA message appeals to this group of people or that group of people. And in young people in general, our message is that sort of stoic self-reliance. And I think back whenever I was in high school, and I wouldn't have wanted to hear any of that. You know, I would not have wanted to hear such a mature message, but a lot of
Mhm.
people do. And so when I'm in the gym and I'm listening to these kids talk, it's I think a lot about like how in the world do you sell to them? You know, like how do you create something? Like how do you demonstrate meaning to somebody that's got so little life experience? And when you're a teenager, there's this battle between knowing what you know and not knowing what you don't know, and you don't realize the difference between those things a lot of the
Knowing what
time.
you think you know. Yeah.
Right, right. And so that's got to targeting that group of people, that's got to be like magic by itself. Do you have like a teenager expert?
We do not. I wish we did, truthfully. I have four younger brothers, which kind of helps me on the end of teenager expert because I have lived through that aspect of it. But no, we do not. I mean, what we kind of rely on again is just a lot of studies and when they come out around, what the 13 to 25-year-old, the whatever the range is, like what are they interested in, and kind of reading into those studies of what are the top five kind of food companies that they're looking at, shoe companies that they're looking at, what TV shows are they watching? Are they using, YouTube, Pinterest, TikTok? What is the most, of these demographics? And that's always changing as well. But I mean, I'm lucky I'm not a copywriter. I have to say, I have crossed over in both, which I think we've all worn many hats being a designer, and now you, copywriter, social media manager. It's always evolving our titles, but that is definitely tricky and finding, what we talked about before, that balance of like kind of saying that edgy, cool language to appeal to them, but also highlighting the performance benefit of whatever we are selling. I would not want to be tasked with that job. It's not easy. Especially just, I think you have to really immerse yourself in that kind of scenario. And how do you do that if you don't have teenage kids or you aren't around teenagers? I've seen a lot of maybe older adults who have been at Under Armour for about 10 years or so kind of talking about how we should be talking and using words like swag and drip and these things. And I'm just, you kind of sit there like, is that what they're saying though? Or do you think that's what's cool
By
right
by the
now?
time somebody's figured that out and it's made its way to TikTok, it's 6 months old, and they're not saying that
And there's
anymore.
a new word. There's a new
Yeah.
word that they found or something discovered. So yeah, I'm fortunate to not be tasked with that, but it is tricky kind of again finding the words to really kind of resonate with them. And I feel like you're having that dialogue with a friend and not just being like forced down, more marketing down your throat as you're kind of scrolling on apps or whatever you see in the world. You want to be different and speak differently, and also have, an authentic voice and brand voice that doesn't change or alter too much as well, just from product to product. So God bless those copywriters is all I have to say.
Yeah, well, it's in our world, we're so heavily marketed to,
Mm-hmm.
especially, I mean, I'm north of 40, so I have a natural disinterest in my phone, but of course I'm staring at it all the time still, but I'm conscientious of what I do on my phone and what I expose myself to. But younger people, it's just, anytime I've struck up conversation with somebody who's younger, it's just like plug the Neuralink into TikTok and leave me alone. Give me an IV of nutrients and I'll stare at TikTok 24 hours a day. And um that evolution of marketing, like whenever I was a kid, we had like I didn't even have cable whenever I was growing up.
I didn't have cable either. My dad even was like, we never even had cable. People thought that, we didn't have money because they'd come over to my house and I'm like, yeah, we don't have cable. And my dad just didn't want me to watch that much TV. He's like, go outside, go play outside. I'm like,
Right.
I'm grateful for that.
What is it like? I mean, 13 channels or something like that. And
I think I can
that
name them.
right. And that's a really, really narrow field for marketing.
Yeah.
It's that maybe it's billboards, maybe celebrity endorsements or something like that. But that's such a narrow field for marketing. And now it's just like every aspect of your life is a marketing channel. Everything. It's just there's no it's gotten so broad and flat, and it's got to be really hard to know where to invest, that you're going to get your return. I mean, that's got to be a huge challenge.
For sure. I don't handle on that side. I'm kind of like, here are the assets, test them, let us know what comes back. Good luck with spending the money. Hope it goes well. But yeah, it's always interesting to kind of get those metrics back and be able to analyze them. But sometimes they're also tricky to analyze. One post or two posts that are the same, one just did really well. What a certain day, a certain time, or one person picked it up. So it's really kind of hard even then to track and determine like what is success in this world of advertising on social media. There's always something new. At first it was like, okay, we're designing for Facebook, Instagram, but now it's covering the gamut of everything and making sure that we're showing up where everyone else is showing up. It's a never ending chase, I feel like.
So, when you figure up all of these different customers that you've got to reach with your marketing, and you figure up all of the different channels that your work has to adapt to, do you guys ever sit down internally and just have to like say, here's the one sentence brand message? Like, do you ever have to like rein it back in and find something to anchor to?
Oh yeah, always. And I mean, it has to be grounded in an insight in some capacity, anything, and I think that's always awesome to remind ourselves that we can come up with the most wildest ideas and dream big, but if it's not grounded in something that's strategic or insightful, or, I learned this and this is what I'm basing this creative idea off of, that's most of the time where it falls flat. Our VP of creative always says the athlete is the answer. And so normally that insight, stems from the athlete, and making sure that whether it is the 16-year-old, the 21-year-old, or, whoever that may be, the 32-year-old elite athlete, making sure that kind of is in line with everything that we're trying to do and say, I think is something that we try to remember. And I feel like even on the agency side, that was always important. It's something that I miss, truthfully, is like normally we're delivered a brief and then we respond to that brief. But, I miss the agency side of kind of having those creative workshops with some of the brands and getting all those insights and mining things. Cause it's like, that's where I feel like you find the nugget that can kind of, change the trajectory of what the concept or the design was going to be. And it's grounded in truth. It's grounded in a truth or an insight that then turns strategic. And the work just ends up being, in my experience, 10 times better than when it wasn't, or it was something that was, okay, well, we have this and we're just going to do this, or we want to see it this way, but we don't have anything to support that will be successful. Yeah, well, most of the time it ends up not being that way. So always grounded in insights and strategy at first, and kind of keeping, the athlete is the answer. What do they struggle with when we're marketing to them, and thinking about what is painful, or what is that, that pain point for them, and what is this product doing to solve that for them, and how can we explain that in the most concise way possible.
Yeah, and your job as designer is to take all of that,
Mhm.
all of it, and distill it into a visual message that sometimes the blink of an eye, sometimes it's more comprehensive, like, interactive design where it's a more immersive experience. But a lot of times it's like distill it down into a second of time. And that's like, that relies so heavily on taste. That's one of the things that my conversations with people who are in design, whether it's graphic design or other industrial design or whatever, that idea of developing your tastes. Tastes it's knowing what's good, right?
Mhm.
And everybody's got taste. Everybody knows what's good. Some people, dinosaur shaped chicken nuggets taste good and nothing else does. Some people, want a five-star French cuisine. But the challenge of the professional creative is they have to know what tastes good to other people.
Mhm.
They have to understand the tastes of, with a large corporation, they have to understand the tastes of a broad swath of society, and they've got to appeal to those tastes. And sometimes they've got to try to change those tastes. They've
Mhm.
got to influence it. They've got to turn those tastes a little bit so it's going to go in the direction that the corporation's going to go in the next 5 years. And that's I can tell you as a teacher, it's really hard to help people develop young people develop their tastes. I was Remember I was teaching with these beautiful little 18-year-old kids, coming in with all their hopes and dreams that it was my job to crush like a cigarette butt. Um, a lot of times I would talk to them about stuff like, I was like, okay, what kind of food do you like? I would say, when you're in a college town, one of the things about a college town is there are more pizza restaurants and chicken wing restaurants per capita in a college town than there are anywhere else in any other segment of society, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so I would say like which your favorite pizza restaurant in town, and I would talk to them about it, and they would, oh, I like Hungry Howie's because they have this like garlic stuff you can spread on. It's like, oh, that's terrible. Pizza's terrible. How about this place? I'll talk about the little place I know that's like one guy in there and he's really passionate about what he does and his pizzas are kind of ugly, but they're really good. I'll talk about that. And like, I tried to get them to talk about like why they thought something was good and why other people might think something is good. And it's one of those things that you can't, it's really easy to teach somebody technical skills. Teaching somebody how to use an application, as frustrating as it is, it's really easy to do. It's a list of things. You can look it up. You use YouTube. You don't need to pay anybody to teach you to do that, right? But teaching somebody to like pay attention to how they feel about things and to understand how other people feel about things it's really, really hard to do, but that's like a core of your job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we used to laugh at maybe some of the foundations that we took, but even thinking of things back to like, color theory and some of the basics when you're making some of these ads, to your point that someone might see for 1 second, it's like it's very imperative to have that knowledge and to consider that. And it's really hard. I think, something I always think about is my bias and trying to have that unconscious bias, or what does that look like for me, and be able to kind of take off my glasses. Okay, well, what does this look like for someone in Amsterdam, or what does this look like for someone in Latin America? Would they resonate with this model? Would they resonate with this athlete? The performance, it is a lot of things to consider, but it is important. And it's important to also remove yourself from the equation. A lot of the time I'll even send work to past peers that I've stayed in touch with, or past coworkers. Sometimes I'll show my mom or my brothers to get their gut reaction. That's the good thing about having 4 younger brothers, is they'll be brutally honest. Like, what the F is that? And I'm like, hey, I designed that. Or, this, like, I would never buy that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll move on from that idea. So it's definitely helpful. And I think even, in this world, we have obviously consumer insights team at Under Armour, and tapping into that to even be able to A/B test certain things. It's super helpful to understand the way that a certain image or a certain headline is making someone feel. And not just having them kind of check A, B, C, D, but get their actual response of, this makes me feel this way. Or, I love that this group of women shows, diversity. I feel included. And you're like, okay, this is great. You're starting to get positive affirmations on things that are successful. And you're getting honest truths on, things that maybe you've been overlooked, or, that are deemed unsuccessful from another consumer's point of view. So I think that's helpful too. But that's an interesting approach to even explaining that to someone who's younger, 18, coming in, and trying to just get them to talk about it. And also being able to defend, their idea when they do kind of create it. Okay, well, I made this because of X, Y, and Z, or this is why I did this, and talking about, the design decisions and what those are. And being able to kind of stand by those is something I've definitely learned over the years. And it is why now I try to ground it, in insight, so that when it does come back on me, I'm like, wait, remember this little nugget that we talked about in the beginning? Here's are the steps we got to get there. But it's tricky sometimes to be able to elaborate, or kind of even explain that vision that you have in your head, and understand how that will kind of be communicated to the world.
Well, yeah, and what you're describing is objectivity and
Mm.
the ability to have objectivity about your work and about other people's work and about a trend in a market or a perception, like whatever. Because the reality is you have to consider all those things, but none of those things are the answer.
Mhm.
The answer is something that's felt and perceived, and that's a lot of the times where talent comes into play for a designer, is that ability to like know and feel the right thing. Whenever I was in undergrad, I started late, but I started in like 2006. And at that point, there was still a lot of reverence for the design rock star from like the 90s, like man, I'm not going to even be able to think of any of their names because I haven't thought about them in so long, but whatever. Most of the people listening to this aren't even going to know who they are. But basically in the 90s, there was this period of sort of revolution in the 80s and 90s, this revolution in graphic design where people who could make a name for themselves by kind of doing their own thing. And they were these sort of rebels and they had their own style. And that allowed them to gain a lot of prominence in the field of design. But at the same time, as times have changed so much now, and we've got such a like highly consumer driven, media consumption driven market for everything, that idea of a designer rock star is practically non-existent. I mean, yeah, we look at like industry leaders and that sort of thing now, but that idea that somebody comes out and they're valuable because of the one thing they do, it's totally irrelevant now. That's not going to drive sales for anything. And when a lot of times whenever I was teaching, I would kind of lay this out for people and I would say, look, you can have two approaches. You can have, yeah, I'm super talented and I'm really good at this one thing that I do, or I'm I have an objective mind and I can look at lots of different styles and I can look at like why something's good and incorporate that into my concept. And I can use different techniques to produce a different end product every time. And that you can follow either of those paths and be very successful. 100% you can do that. But more people are going to achieve more success by being objective than by really polishing their individual style.
Mhm.
And of course, also the problem with polishing your individual style is that you're going to struggle with your ego later, and that's not going to make you a very viable candidate for working with teams of people, which you probably need to do. So, I don't know. Do you ever get people who struggle with design rock star syndrome?
Yeah, I think definitely I've met a few for sure. And I think it makes it tricky. I think it's something that's funny is like at each kind of place that I've been throughout the years, my creative director has always asked me like, where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? The infamous question. I'm like, I don't know, really, to be honest. Like I like what I'm doing right now. I'm designing, I'm leading, I'm art directing, whatever. And it was nice because it was so multifaceted. It wasn't like you're our web designer, you're our social media designer, you're our print designer, you're doing this. Like I got to touch so much that it was like I didn't even know what to call myself at that point. I'm like, I'm just a graphic designer, across, but then people think that is only digital sometimes and you're not getting your hands in elsewhere. And just even talking with my CD now, she's like, where do you see yourself? Do you like this? Do you like that? But I think it is my ability now to jump in and have like, oh, you need a video? I can do a video. I learned After Effects in college. Or you need performance marketing assets? Oh, I can jump in and design those in Illustrator. I think having those abilities also opens more opportunities of like, hey, I can do that, or you don't need to hire somebody else for that. I can do it too. And it has really just helped me with, I think, I don't want to say proving myself, but making me feel like I am a valuable player, that I'm not just kind of niche or, in this little bit of a pigeonhole, like, oh, sorry, I can't help with that. I'm only doing web design. And to your point, not to say, there's a huge success. And if you focus in a niche and have that mastery, then of course you're gonna, get that high paying job or whatever that is, or run your own, shop with that very specific illustration style or that mastery of skill or whatever that is. But for me, I found that it's kind of dabbling in a lot of things, and I actually enjoy it because then I'm never doing the same thing all the time. It's always kind of, this constant evolution of one day, I'm making a video, the next day I'm doing this digital design, the next day I'm, flying out to art direct a photo shoot. And I think it's that constant kind of change that really challenges me to be on point and look for a different opportunity or a different approach to these different scenarios that I'm kind of put in.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate truth is that there's a lot of instability that comes with being a professional creative. It doesn't matter what you do, even if you're working in something that's highly technologically driven, that there's going to be a huge need for, there's always instability because whenever like the economy goes bad or whenever your organization has a financial problem, marketing's the first thing to go. I mean, every single time, that's where jobs are going to get cut first. And it's it's kind of like it's a weird thing because a lot of people go into creative fields because they're creative people and they enjoy that sort of intellectual freedom of being able to take something that they did and make that their job, you know.
Mhm.
But the reality is that a lot of times it's more of a trade skill. And a lot of the time, like if you're not able to apply your brilliant ideas in a lot of different ways to suit a lot of other people's end goals, then you're not very valuable. But if you're a person that can do almost anything, there's always going to be security in being somebody that they can't afford to fire, right? That's
Mhm.
always a good way to go about it. But unfortunately, I think a lot of professional creatives have to make a decision if that's what they really want to do. If they really want to invest in all those skills, if that's going to satisfy them at the end of the
Gonna
day.
pay off, yeah, or not. And it is kind of like sometimes, you feel like you wear so many hats, especially on the agency side, when you're just like, you hired me as a designer and now I'm a strategist, some of this, some of that, especially when you're at a smaller agency. um but I think, yeah, it's tricky because, I think you want to master these skills, but then it does feel like sometimes where, you're in this one world and it's like nobody else can kind of, burst that bubble, where I feel like if you are kind of open to these new things, great, then you can kind of have that experience. I guess what I'm saying is it's tricky because some of the times, yes, maybe I have felt, okay, this is outside of my job description. So if you want me to do these things, then you're going to need to pay me more money. Or, hey, this is my job description and I'm doing XYZ, LMNOP, QRS, TUV. This just isn't going to fly. So I think for me, it's also, over the past 6 years, you start to get a little bit more confidence. At first, you're like, maybe the first couple years, it's like, I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. You got to put put in the time, put in the work. But then you start to kind of, draw a little bit of those boundaries of like, sure, I can do this video, but I'm not going to take on this project, or I'm not going to do this, or making those decisions. Like, you really do have to protect yourself in those positions that will take advantage. Like, oh, well, Sarah can do that. Oh, let's ask Sarah. Oh, well, Sarah can do that. Let's ask Sarah. I used to always be the yes man. Yes, 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 I'll do it. And I got to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I overwhelmed? Oh, because I took on all this work. It's like at that point you have to take accountability. Like, I did this to myself, truthfully. And now I'm going to set those boundaries so that I don't allow it to happen again. But it's a tricky balance to kind of teeter of like, I really want to look good, or I really want to jump in and do this extra bonus project, and of like, should I be like, that's crossing over my work-life balance, or, I'm staying up the past couple nights, or whatever that is. It's tricky to kind of navigate it at certain times.
So, Sarah, tell me, what do you consider to be your greatest success?
Oh, that's a tough question. My greatest success. Are we talking about like career rise or just in life in general?
100% totality of your existence on planet Earth.
Oh my goodness, my biggest success. Well, I have to say, growing up, my parents were avid boaters of the Chesapeake Bay. So we would always come down to Maryland. We'd always be boating in the inner harbor. We'd always, and that's where Under Armour's headquartered. So, even when I was 10 on the boat, I'm seeing this huge Under Armour sign in the headquarters. It was always something that I thought, would be a dream job. And so to be here now, before I'm 30 years old is kind of really exciting for me, to be honest. It's kind of like, okay, I've had this dream job, I've worked my way up kind of the ranks or the ladder, if you will. And now I'm here, and now it's kind of like, now what? But I would say that is my biggest success so far, is like I set this in my mind a long time ago. Actually, when I graduated too, I was presented with, the job of working at agency or doing the MLB shirts. And I think it's just really nice to kind of, end up in this spot and in this position and sitting on this global level. and having, a lot of this freedom and flexibility to really kind of take it by the reins and see what's to come. Within that, I think, the successes that I have had, flying and art directing that photo shoot, which was with Diana Flores. I'm not sure if you heard of her, but she was the one that was in that Super Bowl commercial last year, the female kind of flag football player, kind of dodging all those athletes. We signed her as an athlete recently, so it was a real honor to work with her and having her be the face, of our OG base layer, which Under Armour was founded upon, and hearing just great success stories from that. In addition to just recently worked on a project for a sports bra, which I'm not sure if you can relate, but us women struggle with sports bras in this industry, athlete or not.
I've never struggled with a sports bra in my life.
I know. When you're really sweaty, it's really hard to get off, right? So I'm sure you can relate. But what was really awesome is just the product team had such cool innovations. I mean, now you can unhook the straps in the front, and just there's so much technology involved that has improved the ease of on and off. And, one of our athletes models had came up to me, at the end of the shoot, and we didn't even know this when we had casted her, but she was born with 2 fingers. And she kind of, we had this moment of, this product changes my life. Like, I can unclip this. This makes my life so much easier. I can't believe this is even a real thing. And I think that moment really kind of defined, wouldn't say success, but just like confirmation in this journey that I'm on of like helping, Under Armour makes products that help people, get better, makes people better. And I truly believe in that, and seeing it kind of firsthand and experience that, I think that is my biggest success, just helping these athletes and even non-athletes on a day-to-day, and hearing their stories. That's kind of the success in my life right now.
All right. So what's the hardest thing you've ever had to do?
Oh, hardest thing. I would say, well, earlier in the podcast, you did say us creative people aren't math and science people. That is actually untrue for me. So maybe I'm not in the right field, or what's going on with me, or I do have left and right-minded brain. I'm not sure, but I actually in high school, I love math and physics. I love science. And so when I first started applying to colleges, like that's what I thought I was going to do. Until I entered this web design competition. And then I was like, oh my gosh, you can go to school for this? Like, this is a thing? I'm like, I'm doing this instead. And when I was I actually went to James Madison University in Virginia before I went to Temple and the Tyler School of Art. I was there for 2 years. And they were building this huge state-of-the-art facility. So, when you were starting your classes for design, it would be finished and built by then. It kind of fell through, and I just felt like the professors there, great as they were not tough. Like, they were not mean. They were the nicest humans I had ever met. Like, great job. It was easy to get an A. And I just had an inkling, like, this can't be right. Like, this can't be this easy. And I was a little homesick. And so I wanted to transfer to Temple and the Tyler School of Art. And so I applied. And Temple accepted me, but actually the art school denied me at first. And I bawled my eyes out. I'm like, my life's over. This is the best, one of the best art schools on the East Coast to go to. I have to do this. And so instead of honestly just accepting that as my fate, I had wrote a letter to the art school and said, I'm curious why my application wasn't accepted. Like, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I had no doubt in my, bone in my body that I was good at, design and artistry, whatever, the whole nine. They had told me that I wasn't a good enough drawer, that the drawings that I submitted were not good. And I was like, okay, well, I'm applying to the graphic design program. Like, does that really matter? And so, I was like, okay, give me 1 week. I will resubmit drawings. And I remember I locked myself in my room for a week. I turned off my phone. I didn't talk to anyone. And I just sat and drew. I had to draw a self-portrait and one other still life. And it was like, I don't even know how many times I redrew it. I think like 7 or 8. And I took the best ones, resubmitted it. And they were like, okay, yeah, you can draw. We'll accept you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there we go. So I would say that's one of the biggest, because I do remember, at that moment in time, it feels like your life's over, it's shattered, you won't go on. But just, not that you should ever not accept no for an answer, but just knowing, if something feels and having that intuition that this is what you're meant to do, then stand by that and don't just, sometimes say no. Be like, what can I do, or how can I improve this? Or see what you're missing, to kind of be able to get there. So I would say that was kind of one of my hardest moments. And then even after getting accepted, it was kind of this ambiguity of even getting accepted into the design program. You had to take a year of foundational courses and then apply into the design program. So I still am like, was teetering on the edge of, okay, I'm going to go in here as my third year, and I could pretty much get turned down, and have to start all over again, where a freshman would start and, be okay to kind of re-navigate their trajectory. But luckily it all worked out for the best. But it's just interesting to think that, I might not be in this position had I had not sent that email and resubmitted those drawings.
Well, on behalf of everyone on earth, I would like to thank you that the world didn't come to an end when you're with your first rejection.
Yeah,
We're all
first
happy to be
rejection.
here. Yeah.
Well, a couple rejections, that was, I had gotten some rejections from some of my, schools I first applied to. But yes, the world does not end when you think, when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, you think it will end in that moment, but it does not. And you learn that and look back and kind of laugh now that that's why you thought the world was ending.
Well, your instinctive response to be tenacious and be persistent and stick with the problem, even though you experienced who's this person here?
This is, he's making an appearance. This is my wiener dog, Cheeto.
Cheeto, perfect name for a wiener dog.
It's a sidekick. Stage 7 clinger always has to be next to me.
Excellent. Well, the downloads for the podcast just went up like 70%. So excellent. Thank you so much for that. Tenacity and the persistence that you applied to solving that problem, and to not give up, and to face rejection with perseverance.
Yeah.
Is that the way you solve a lot of your problems in life?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's a lot of times, and like I said, I think having the professors like yourself that really build us to be strong, there's a reason for that. And I think especially in this industry, it's hard sometimes. It's like I second guess myself all the time. Like, am I good enough? Should I even be saying that? Like, can I stand up for myself? And most of the time I'd say the answer is yes. And, sometimes when it's not what you want, it's sometimes maybe being transparent and just asking for what you want and how can I get there and what can I do? And then, having those clear, honest answers in order to be able to execute upon that. So
Part of being successful is having confidence in yourself. And that, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, but the way you develop confidence is through skill acquisition, and it's through refining yourself, and it's through continuing to do a difficult thing even when you want to give up. And you go through that process, you're going to be better. I mean, even if you ultimately have to change tracks or whatever, you are going to be better at that than you were before. Somehow, some way you've improved. And that's the core of resilience, is having gone through it and made the decision inside of yourself that you can do more, you can try harder, that you have more inside of yourself to give. And it really doesn't matter what you're going to do in life. If you're able to adopt that attitude, as terrifying and difficult as it can be, that's where it's going to get you at the end of the day of success. So
yeah.
I think that's a very valuable skill, and it's what's helped you get underneath the big Under Armour sign that you saw
Yeah.
whenever you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good takeaway from our conversation today. I think that's the lesson that we can all use, especially people in creative fields, because in my experience, there are like two sorts of people that go into the creative field. There's like type A personality who's going to go just keep working hard at it and keep trying to keep learning and stay positive, even though, they've been up all night and they're a mess and the world seems to be falling down around them. They keep upbeat and they keep going. And then there's the kind of like sensitive art kid that, is kind of like by themselves in the corner and dressing in all like shades of gray and black, and
Yeah.
struggles with that social stuff. And they're the ones who really have to go through a little bit more of a transformation in terms of being tough, getting tough, stepping back up when the world takes a swing at you, jumping back up and swinging back. And so, somewhere, somehow, some kid in art school who's really quiet, stays by themselves, they're going to hear your story, and they're going to keep trying hard. So you did good.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's not an easy road. I can't say that I had, maybe I sometimes want to channel that energy and confidence that I did have back in that year, to say, no, I'm not accepting no for an answer. I think it's not a linear journey for sure. And I think again, the more effort you put in, and the more success that you start to see from that, or that validation of like, wow, this really turned out well, and that having echoed through peers and colleagues, also gives you that level of like, okay, what I'm doing is meaningful, it is impactful, and kind of reassures you that you're not just, is that person better? Is this person better? Am I doing the right thing? And all that kind of, that self-doubt creeps up, and you can just kind of, nope, but let's go back down, and believe in, the abilities and all the experience that you have that kind of led you to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can find meaning in what you do, you're way more likely to stay with it. You're way more likely to invest yourself in it, and it's a lot easier to put blinders on and to stay focused on your end goal, because that meaning is everything. It's what gives you joy, and it's also what's going to make your work valuable to the rest of the world. And that's not something that can be overvalued, I think. Um, well, we're nearing the end of the time that I've asked you for today. So, do you want people to find you on the internet or not? You want to plug your
Again.
social?
Sure, I will. It's just my first and last name, at Sarah with an H, Seamonson, Seamonson, and that is my Instagram. I'm not sharing my TikTok though, because that is just videos of my dog. I might, if you can find that, you might be led to my TikTok, but it's just me experimenting with videos and stitching them together. They are of Cheeto though, which they are cute, but there's other Cheeto content, I guess, to be enjoyed as well.
Well, I think if you're making TikToks of your dog, that's pretty much like stellar winning TikTok content. So,
That's why I did it. I was like, maybe I will be, I'm hoping just one morning I wake up and log in and you see that it's like blown up, but I'm not sure that's going to happen quite yet. We'll have to keep putting in the effort here every 3 months.
well, I don't know who makes Cheetos. Probably Frito-Lay, and they're probably owned by somebody else. But I'm sure the sponsorship is coming soon. Now that we've made Cheeto a star on TikTok,
For
so
sure.
just sit back and wait for those checks to roll in. Well, certainly. Also, I hope we'll all go out and buy a bunch of Under Armour now that we know how good the design team is over there.
And
And
how technical it is, and that nobody knew that before, there's some serious science behind it. So,
absolutely, not just a logo and an ad. It's
yeah,
there are people whose whole careers revolve around making a good product.
that is true. That would be me.
Thank you for your time. I've enjoyed
Yeah.
talking to you. And thank you to everybody who listened. We will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
This episode of You Are Not Enough, the GFDA podcast, is brought to you by the GFDA Lecture and Workshop Series. We believe that everyone wants to feel a sense of accomplishment in their work. They want to find meaning in what they do. And they want to feel confident the people they work with share that spirit. Oftentimes, though, personality and ego conflicts can get in the way of this. And at large organizations in particular, departments can have a hard time communicating effectively or coordinating themselves towards shared success. We've helped clients like Nike, New Balance, Church & Dwight, Adobe, and others overcome these issues. We come to our clients for 1 or 2 days, break their large organization down into small teams, and present them with a series of challenges that allow them to fail and succeed together. And they see each other in a new light. New respect is born as a result of our training. We have entirely proprietary methods. There are no trust falls, sticky notes, or improv exercises. What we do is based on research and our many years as professional educators. If you feel like you need what we have, please go to gfda.co/events or just click the link below, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks.